So when it comes to the Clemmensen reduction, pretty much every textbook, instructor and tutorial out there will show you an example similar to what I have here. We have some sort of a carbonyl, like an aldehyde or a ketone. I have a ketone in this case. We treat that with zinc amalgam in the presence of the hydrochloric acid, and as a result we get rid of the ketone and we get our fully reduced species. And if that is all that you want to know about this reaction, then hit the like button, share, subscribe, and I will see you next time. But if you really want to know how that works, then pull up your chair, get yourself a cup of coffee, and let's talk about that. That's gonna be a wild ride. So let's start with the mechanism of the Clemmensen reduction. First of all, the reaction happens at the zinc surface, so everything that we are going to be discussing here is going to be happening at the surface of our metal. So what I'm going to do, I will show my metal surface like so, and then I'm going to be using a sample carbonyl, in this case just the acetone for the simplicity's sake. The most common version of this mechanism that you are most likely going to see everywhere, going to start with a single electron transfer from our zinc onto our oxygen, where we are going to be making the zinc-oxygen bond, and as a result of this single electron transfer we are going to get the following radical species. Then somehow the carbon-oxygen bond is going to split up and part of our molecule without oxygen is going to migrate onto the other zinc atom that is sitting nearby, and as a result we're going to get zinc oxide and this zinc carbenoid species. The other variation of this mechanism would involve the formation of this three-membered ring with the zinc in the middle, and then we again split it into two, into zinc oxide and the zinc carbenoid. Now again, for the simplicity's sake, I'm going to separate those two and I'm going to show one reaction where I'm using my zinc oxide, this species over here, and I'm going to react it with my hydrochloric acid to form the aqueous zinc chloride and of course water as a co-product in this reaction. And the other part of this mechanism involves our zinc carbenoid, where the zinc carbenoid is going to grab the proton from our hydrochloric acid floating around, giving us the following intermediate. Then it's going to happen one more time, giving us our final product, the zinc cation and a couple of chloride anions floating around, so I can rewrite that as zinc chloride. And as I've mentioned, this is the most commonly shown mechanism that you can find on the internet and even in some textbooks. So do we have overwhelming amount of evidence to support this mechanism? Well, of course not! As the matter of fact, pretty much everything about this mechanism is highly questionable. So let's break it down piece by piece. And the first thing that I want to talk about is this zinc radical species. This intermediate has essentially been postulated in the Journal of Electrochemistry in 1927, and there hasn't been much of a challenge to that. And the reason why they proposed the formation of this intermediate is, well, it seems to be pretty obvious on the surface. Let's say we look at a couple of classic Clemmensen reductions. I have my first example over here with acetone, and my second example with acetophenone. In the first case we are going to expect to see propane, and in the second case we're going to expect to see the ethyl benzene as our products. Now, a well-known side product in these reactions is going to be the corresponding pinnacle, which is a 1,2-diol species, and it has been postulated that the only way you can get that side product is via the recombination of our radical intermediate, so therefore we gotta have the radical intermediate. Besides, many other reactions involving free metal do form radicals via the single electron transfers, so that only seems reasonable, right? But there is one significant wrinkle, and that problem is that another very common and quite abundant side product in the Clemmensen reduction is the corresponding alkenes. And here is the thing, no matter how you spin it, there is no way you'll be able to get an alkene from the radical. And another problem is that alkenes are sometimes such an abundant side product that instead of the major product of the reduction, you are essentially going to end up having a polymer based from the alkene, and you just get a bunch of tar that you will most likely just throw away with a flask. So the proposed mechanism literally cannot account for the formation of a very significant side product. And the second issue that we have is with the carbenoid intermediate. If we think about the carbenoid intermediate with the zinc-carbon double bond, then we have a glaring issue in the fact that the carbon-zinc double bond would have to have the p orbital overlap, which is just unreasonable. Zinc is so much larger than carbon that the orbital overlap between those two atoms to make a double bond is just completely unreasonable. To account for that, some people say that we have a separation of charges. So we have a negative charge on the carbon and we have a positive charge on the zinc in addition to the carbon-zinc bond. That is also quite problematic because in this case, the carbon that already has a negative charge will also be quite polarized from the zinc, so instead of just a negative charge, it looks like it will have something like negative 1.5 charge. And we're still talking about carbon here. Carbon can barely support negative charge as is. Having a more than one negative charge or more than 1.0 negative charge, so to speak, that's just, I like science fiction, but that's already pushing it. So the existence of the carbenoid intermediate here is also highly questionable. Well, do we have any other evidence? And yes, we absolutely have more evidence. There have been a few very extensive kinetic studies of this reaction that resulted in two extremely important observations. The first observation is that the kinetic studies do not support the single electron transfer steps. And the second very interesting observation here is that the rate determining step, the rate of that step, really depends on the concentration of the chloride anion and on the concentration of zinc in zinc amalgam. So what sort of a mechanism do we have instead? Well, what the kinetic studies suggest is that instead of a single electron transfer, we have a regular two-electron transfer. So the complete electron pair on zinc is going to go towards our carbonyl, polarize it like so, and give us the following intermediate. In this intermediate, we are forming a zinc carbon bond right away, and we have this alkoxide with the O- hanging by itself. It has also been suggested that this step is aided by the chloride coordinating the carbonyl and zinc and sort of like working as an intermediary to bring those two species together. And once we have our alkoxide, we are immediately going to do the proton transfer with the HCl. That will give us the following intermediate where we have OH and we have zinc connected to our carbon atom instead. Now, from here, we can have a few well-documented side products. The first one is going to be an alcohol product that is just an interaction of our zinc organic with the HCl. Zinc organic, like pretty much any other organometallic compound, is somewhat basic, so we can expect this to grab a proton from our HCl like so, and that would give us our alcohol as a side product. It's usually not the major product, and depending on how the reaction is done, sometimes it's present in negligible quantities. The other reaction with HCl is going to proceed via the SN1 style, where we are going to protonate the OH goes away, making the following carbocation, and then from there we are going to get the following chloride. That chloride is also quite significant because that guy also gives us the side product via the same reaction or the same style of reaction where we get the alcohols from. So here our zinc carbon bond gets protonated by HCl like so, and we get chloride as a side product, and those are also well documented. Again, they don't happen all the time, they are not always present or accounted for, but whenever people were specifically looking for those side products, they always found chlorides. And another piece of evidence that we have for this carbocationic species is that we know that if we have carbocations, we often see carbocation rearrangements. And do we have those in these reactions? We absolutely do. And on top of that, we have an E1 style eliminations giving us alkenes. So if, let's say, I bring cyclohexanone and I subject that to the Clemmensen reduction style reaction, then the intermediate here is going to be the following carbocation. From here, we can do a hydride shift from the nearby position, so this hydrogen with all of its electrons can migrate onto where the zinc and the carbocation is, giving us the the following intermediate, and then from here, this is a classic E1 style reaction where the zinc is going to fall off, and as a result, we're going to get a double bond. And this style of the carbocation rearrangement followed by the elimination accounts for pretty much every single alkene side product that I've seen in literature. But we still need to get to our reduction point somehow. So what has been proposed is that we bring another equivalent of our zinc, and again we are going to have a 2-electron transfer, so this zinc is going to push its electrons onto our carbocation, giving us a carbanion, which is back to our carbenoid species, unfortunately. And then from there we have the same mechanism as I've mentioned a moment ago in the previous page. So while I do have a lot of problems with this carbenoid, it doesn't look like we have a better species that is happening in this mechanism, so that's kind of what we have for the moment. Personally, I suspect that the real structure for this intermediate might be something where we have multiple zinc centers coordinating around multiple alkyl groups, similar to, let's say, organolithium compounds or something like that, but I couldn't really find any evidence on that, so if maybe you have any reference, let me know in the comments. Honestly, I just don't think that there has been much research into the Clemmensen reduction mechanism past 60s and 70s. And so that brings me to the question, which mechanism is correct? And based on everything that I saw in the literature, it is both. The cationic mechanism that I have on the screen right now accounts for the vast majority of the rearrangements, the majority of the side products, and pretty much anything in between. The radical mechanism that I showed you a moment ago also does have some merit, but it looks like instead of zinc, what actually participates in the single electron transfer is the mercury metal. There is this concept in electrochemistry called double electrode theory, which basically tells us that if we have two metals in contact, the electrons are going to start going or flowing away from the less active metal, and the more active metal is going to be donating its electrons to that less active metal. So it looks like the electrons flow from the more active metal, but the less active metal, mercury in this case, is basically the transfer agent. And based on all the electrochemical studies, including different electrochemical potentials and everything that has been investigated for reactions like that, it does look like the single electron transfers do happen, but the culprit there is mercury and not zinc, because people did manage to make these radicals without zinc altogether, just using mercury. So when it comes to the Clemmensen reduction, the actual mechanism is ionic, but the radical stuff also does happen as a minor competing mechanism. And so from the practical perspective, if we think how we use the Clemmensen reduction, looking at some examples, like here for instance I have acetophenone, if I do the Clemmensen reduction on acetophenone, the major product is still going to be the ethylbenzene, what I really want from this reaction, along with a few side products that I've mentioned a few moments ago. So while your textbook might not telling you the entire picture, in a ballpark we're still getting what we want from this reaction. Likewise, if let's say I have a molecule with multiple carbonyls on that, the Clemmensen reduction will also be able to reduce both of those, giving you a fully reduced product looking like that. The important thing here to keep in mind though is that the reaction is done in a very concentrated acid, typically at elevated temperature. We are talking about usually 40% hydrochloric acid, which is literally as concentrated as hydrochloric acid can go. It cannot go above about 39-40%, that's just the maximum for that thing. Which means that if you have any functional groups that can be sensitive towards acids, they can be impacted. For instance, in this case, if I am not careful with my reaction, in addition to the reduction of my carbonyl, I also end up hydrolyzing my ester, because we are working in the aqueous acidic conditions, and that's literally what hydrolyzes esters. So when thinking whether to use the Clemmensen reduction or any of the alternatives, you have to be very careful and you have to think about all the other functional groups that you might have in your molecule which could potentially be impacted. And of course, another thing to keep in mind is that that since the Clemmensen reduction is typically done in aqueous media, the larger your organic molecule is, the less of the solubility it's going to have in aqueous media, so reaction really doesn't want to work well on large molecules unless you have a lot of hydrophilic functional groups in it, like alcohols or maybe carboxylic acids or something of that sort. But of course this reaction wouldn't be half as fun if it always worked the way it was supposed to. Here is an example of a reaction where things couldn't go more wrong. On the surface, it looks like a simple Clemmensen reduction starting with a 1,3-cyclohexane dione. And of course we are going to get some cyclohexane as our final product, but in addition to that, we are also going to get a couple of these guys and a few other products. So what's going on here? Well, if we think about the mechanism of this reaction, half the way through the mechanism we're going to end up with this species where we have our alcohol and zinc sitting on the same carbon. That carbon is nucleophilic. And the carbonyl that we have in this molecule is, well, electrophilic. So these two species can easily react with each other, giving you the following intermediate after the proton transfer. So now, if I bring my HCl, the three-membered ring can easily open like so, giving me the following protonated intermediate, which we can quickly deprotonate with water or whatever we have floating around and get our final product. And the funny part is that the side products in this reaction are actually more major than the actual product that we want. We're actually going to end up with all of these side products and not cyclohexane as our main product. However, not all 1,3-dicarbonyl is going to react like that, of course. There is a whole bunch of examples where 1,3-dicarbonyls reduce without too much troubles, and typically what we are going to see is those are usually not 1,3-diketones, but rather those are going to be beta-ketoesters. Those seems to work reasonably well and reduce the way we would expect them to. Another interesting consequence of our mechanism, as I've mentioned before, is carbocation rearrangements. So here is a fun example where I'm starting with a cyclooctanone, I'm subjecting that to the Clemmensen reduction conditions, and as a result, I'm going to end up with a bicyclic compound. And if I think through the mechanism of this reaction, what happens first, we are going to get all the way to this carbocationic intermediate with zinc, but from here, we are going to take one of these hydrogens all across the molecule, and one of those guys going to migrate to the position where we have our carbocation, giving us a new carbocation, and, well, carbocations are electrophilic, the organometallics are nucleophilic, so now these two guys can react with each other and give us our final product, cinching that ring and connecting it together right in the middle, turning one large cycle into a bicyclic skeleton. Transannular rearrangements like that are a huge problem when it comes to large cycles and the Clemmensen reduction. So if you are trying to do something like that, expect unexpected. Another interesting example where the Clemmensen reduction does something unexpected is alpha-beta unsaturated carbonyls. In that case, in addition to the carbonyl itself, typically we are also going to lose the double bond too. How exactly that happens? Well, that's a good question. In addition to the pure reduction products like that, we're also going to get some very funky co-products, but I'm not going to focus on that. Here is another example where in addition to our carbonyl, we're also losing the double bond. So if you have an alpha-beta unsaturated carbonyl, expect that the major product is going to be a complete reduction of both carbonyl and your double bond. And finally, one last example that I have where the Clemmensen reduction does something that it's not supposed to is the reduction of alpha-ketocarboxylic acids. In that case, the major product is typically going to be the corresponding alpha-hydroxycarboxylic acid. So we are going to stop at the formation of the alcohol rather than the formation of the alkane. Basically, we're not getting rid of the oxygen completely. The oxygen is still going to stay there. Again, why exactly it happens like that is a good question, so if you have any cool ideas, let me know in the comments below. So, what do you think about the Clemmensen reduction? Not bad for a reaction that textbooks only spend maybe a paragraph on, right? Which part was the most unexpected for you? Let me know in the comments, and as always, thank you for watching. If you liked this video and learned something new today, boop the like button, subscribe for more, and I will see you next time.